Hello? Oh, okay. Can you hear me? No. Does that work? No. Okay. I'm going to have to hold it a little bit closer. Okay, I'd like to welcome you all to the Money Where It Matters, where we're looking at how we're driving climate finance for sustainable development. My name's Chris Buss. I'm the director of the UICN Centre for Economy and Finance. UICN is one of the partners in the Forest and Farm Facility with IIED, the International Institute for Environment and Development, FAO, and AgriCord. Welcome to this session. We have 1.5 hours, and we have 2 panels. But I was just going to give a few introductory words on where we are. I was asked to respond to a few questions, and one of the first ones was, well, what's the trend in climate finance? And I probably think the trend in climate finance is that we have a lot of pledges, but we're not really seeing their financing flow. And we're not really seeing where it goes, and does it go in the right place? Is it going to the right place for sustainable development? Is it getting to the ground where actually the action really happens? I mean, we as IUCN, we did a lot of work on forest landscape restoration, and 75% of the world's opportunity for restoration is on forest and farmland, on mosaic farmland, where farmers are central to doing that. And we see that, you know, figures such as the global, as small-scale producers in Asia and sub-Saharan Africa, they produce 80% of the food that's consumed. But actually, we're seeing very small amounts of climate finance getting to those farmers. 1.7% of climate finance in 2018 was getting down onto the ground. That's 10 billion compared to the 240 billion that is needed to address climate and climate challenges. So progress here is critical. And I think one of the big reflections here that I'm seeing is if you look through COP26 and COP27, you're now seeing climate and nature and people intrinsically linked. You're seeing nature-based solutions being central to a lot of the discussions. And also, more importantly, you're seeing, in relation to all of those points, you're seeing agriculture front and center. And I think that's even bigger since COP26, that the conversations around agriculture are now getting mainstreamed in these climate talks and these conversations. So it's a very ripe time now to have those conversations. However, in a lot of the conversations, and we go on to start talking through on markets and challenges around markets, we hear a lot of discussion about carbon markets, and that's fine. That's part of the solution, but it mustn't skew the opportunities that we have through other markets, and particularly nature-based solution investments, agricultural investments, and making sure that those investments, they're not only investments for good economic returns, they're actually good for land resilience and good for people and nature. But we also need to be thinking about how those finances flow. Both public and private finance is driven from the top. It comes down top, but it's not responding to the demands of the smallholders and farmers. And I hopefully through the 2 panels today, we're going to hear reflections on that and why we need to be changing that land dwellers are driving those investments through a decentralized process, and we're getting climate finance onto the ground. But in order to do that, we need the access to the climate finance, and there needs to be trust and natural capital being the central pillars of those. We need to shift the balance of power that the smallholders are accessing that finance to move away from the 1.7% and increase that. And local funds do exist, but not at a scale that's really needed at all. And you know, one of the reflections that we've been having a lot of discussions around in the Forest and Farm Facility is you hear these comments about, you know, the fiduciary requirements and the fiduciary responsibility as of donors and to their taxpayers' money. Well, we've just seen in the last 2 or 3 years trillions of dollars flowing to keep economies afloat during the COVID crisis. I come from the UK, and some of the schemes that were being used in there were just writing checks, no fiduciary processes, and it won't get looked. Why can't we do the same here to get the money to farmers? And I think that's a real challenge that we need to respond to. And then finally, I think the other point is just looking at public funding and how we shift subsidies. Just as we focus subsidies on low-cost, high-production systems. But as I mentioned earlier, about nature-based solutions, natural capital, we need to shift those systems that integrate much more the cultural, social, and environmental integrity into those systems. And then as we're going to hear through a lot of this session around finance, we will hear that actually the central pillar to that is forest and farm producer organisations. They are an effective mean and a tried and tested mean of mobilising public finance, whether that be through subsidies or also whether that be through private finance, as businesses who have the capacity to access finance. So again, I'd like to welcome you to this event. I'm going to hand over now to Tina Huvio from the Food and Forest Development Finland, which is a member of AgriCord, and she's going to facilitate both sessions, I believe. The first one will be looking at macro finance conditions, so for financing forest and farm producer organisations, a market but then the second session around the supply chains and market-based mechanisms and how we mobilise finance down to the local level to do that. So, Tina, I shall hand over to you, and good luck, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the session. Thank you.
Okay, let's try this one. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for the inspirational words in the beginning. I think that they provide us a good setup to start the discussion. There should be translation available, so please put the if you need the it's not there. Ah, okay. In any case, we have here now 4 panelists, and the first panel is about more the, let's say, public funding, conventional funding, governments, intergovernmental pledges, etc. And in these events, we have a lot of talk about, financial instruments, what should be put in place, how to channel funding. In this panel, we would like to hear from the farmers, their experiences, and we have here 2 farmers from the Fairtrade coalition, and then we have Steve Muchiri, who is from East African Farmer Federation, and then we have a representative of SIDA. So we have first here Mr. Andres Gonzalez from Paraguay, and he's a sugarcane producer. We have Mr. Pablito Aquino, who is from the Philippines, and he is a coconut producer. As I said, Steve Muchiri is from East African Farmers Federation, a CEO. He knows well farm realities in various countries in East Africa. And then we have Ms. Amanda Liedgren, who is a climate advisor for SIDA, the Swedish development agency. I would like to start by giving you about 4 or 5 minutes each to explore how do you feel. What is your experience on climate funding? As a farmer, have you been in touch with the government? Have you received any other funding? What do you see as opportunities, and what do you see as bottlenecks? And we start with the farmer level, then going to Steve, and then finally Amanda. You are here kind of a donor representative. So it would be nice to then have some reflection between you, like what could be done better, or if there are good experiences from elsewhere that we could learn from. But could I start with Mr. Andres Gonzalez? You speak English? Or? He will speak in Spanish, so I do the translation on spot.
No, there is Tina, she forgot that there is interpretation. Tina, there is interpretation. There's no problem. He speaks in Spanish. We have interpretation, and this is working now. We have interpretation.
But, okay. So, Mr. Gonzalez would like to give the first place for Mr. Aquino. Mr. Pablito Aquino, could you please start?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. This is really an honor to be part of this discussion to help this solve this problem of global warming. To answer the question, as far as coconut producers in the Philippines are concerned, we are not receiving a substantial amount of funds for our projects and programs to mitigate the problem of climate change for adaptation and resiliency. In the Philippines, there is this big issue of 10 billion coconut levy funds. These funds were paid by our forefathers who were farming coconut since time immemorial. And the government, during the father of our present president, they collected taxes. Now it runs to about 10 billion pesos, and up to now, this has not been given to the farmers. So we receive a very small, negligible help, I think, for that matter. Now, if we discuss this on a macro level, I believe that the climate finance only give just 5% to farming and producers group, while the rest are into renewable energy and other efforts. I'm not saying that these renewable energy are bad, they are important, but I believe equally and most important, budget should be given to the producers and to farming. We cannot eat cars or electric cars, and we cannot drink solar panels. So please give due priority to farming and agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Pablito. That was a clear testimony. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Andres Gonzalez, and we have Ms. Julieta Torreo from Fairtrade, who has promised to help with the translation. Andreas, ahora toca a usted, entonces, por favor.
Muy bien, muchísimas gracias por esta oportunidad.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yo estoy como representante de la Coordinadora Latinoamericana de Pequeños Productores y Trabajadores de Comercio Justo.
I'm here representing the Central and Latin America Network of Fair Trade Producers.
Soy un productor de caña de azúcar orgánica de Paraguay.
I'm an organic sugarcane producer from Paraguay.
Y realmente como representante de miles de productores y trabajadores de Latinoamérica,
Representing thousands of producers from Latin America,
estamos muy interesados en cuanto a la respuesta del sistema, principalmente al financiamiento climático.
we are highly interested in how is the system going to react when it comes to financing.
Pero al mismo tiempo también al financiamiento climático, la justicia climática.
And beyond climate finance, we are talking about climate justice.
Y también la de construir resiliencia para los pequeños productores para que podamos hacer frente a todas las contingencias que supone el cambio climático.
And building resilience when it comes to climate is imperative, especially if we know how tricky the situations may be when in times of crisis.
Este año 2022 es uno de los años más difíciles o más problemáticos, pero que nosotros preferimos decir en vez de un año difícil o problemático, un año muy desafiante para todos los productores.
2022 has been an extremely challenging and tricky year. However, we want to frame that as a year that has brought us challenges in a way that it can be positive and we can sort something out.
Es un año muy desafiante, ya que implica que los productores tenemos que estar ante una constante y más severa manifestación de los cambios climáticos, o sea, que de todo lo que implica la contingencia de cambio climático.
It's a very, very challenging year for all producers when it comes to climate contingency.
Y también la frecuencia y de la impredecibilidad de toda la contingencia de cambio climático para que nos está afectando a los pequeños productores.
And there we're also talking about frequency and how that is affecting all producers.
Esos desafíos significan que tenemos que tener una respuesta también nosotros para los pequeños productores, pero también a los niños, a los jóvenes, a las mujeres, que formamos parte de todas esas organizaciones.
And from us, it means that we need an answer to all these producers, but also their community, being children, being women, and everyone who takes part there.
Necesitamos dar esa respuesta para que podamos seguir produciendo, para que podamos seguir comprometiéndonos. En este caso, en la CLAC hemos plantado más de 300.000 árboles en menos de 6 meses, como una forma de demostrar de que estamos comprometidos, a pesar de nuestras limitaciones de recursos, en hacer algo para mejorar nuestro planeta.
And from there, we must say that we are committed and we are taking initiative. For example, this year we have planted, and if you can repeat the number, ¿cuántos árboles, Andrés?
Más de 300.000 árboles.
Over 300,000 trees within this region. We are committed to take action, but we do need support.
Necesitamos dar una respuesta a los niños, a los jóvenes, para poder seguir produciendo, para que esos jóvenes puedan tener arraigo, para que esos jóvenes puedan tener una posibilidad de continuar, seguir produciendo y seguir produciendo alimentos para todo el mundo.
And this answer becomes, sorry, can you hear me? Can you hear me here? Switching microphones now. And this answer is very crucial when we talk to youth. We need to be able to keep producing, and therefore this must be attractive for young producers as well.
Porque así como vemos, el próximo año va a ser mucho más desafiante. Y así como estamos superando una pandemia, no sabemos qué le espera al mundo. Hay una crisis energética y yo creo que estamos en la puerta de una crisis alimentaria. Y si no hay productores, si los jóvenes no se comprometen, no hay futuro para los jóvenes en la producción, yo creo que el mundo va a sufrir algo más terrible que la pandemia, que sería una crisis alimentaria a nivel mundial.
And as we were exiting a crisis, we are now facing first what could be an energy crisis, but actually we might be facing a crisis when it comes to agriculture. And what does that mean for the future?
Y el tiempo sigue corriendo.
And the clock is ticking.
El tiempo sigue corriendo y necesitamos respuestas. Necesitamos respuestas y necesitamos acción climática, necesitamos justicia climática.
We need answers, we need action, we need justice.
Thank you. As I've understood, the audience have a translation, so in that sense, I think we can cope here. We've heard quite dramatic testimonies from the field. Despite of all the pledges, the farmers do feel that there is a crisis, and this is a very harsh year. There's also a possibility that this will push even more people to hunger. Steve, you are sitting in an important position in East Africa. How do you see that the role of farm organizations, and what are your possibilities to respond to the needs of your members and all the way to the individual farmers? Please.
Yes, thank you. So I'm Steve Moshiri from the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation. We are a regional network of national apex associations and federations in 10 countries, representing more than 25 million smallholder farmers. I think my question was around our experience in as far as issues of climate finance, access to climate finance are concerned. Right from the onset, just like my colleagues have said, farmers in East Africa have not really accessed any climate finance. And just like the shocks in the Americas, I think a lot of farmers in East Africa are now clearly exposed. We've had pandemic, economic, climate shocks as well, and the insecurities in Russia and Ukraine. And this has actually put a lot of farmers in a state of being vulnerable. What we've done as a federation is that we've tried to understand this whole process of access to climate finance. And it's very interesting because when you look at the whole area of just proposal writing for climate funding, it's not an easy task for any farm organization. And what we did is that we started first by trying to understand the architecture of funding, the flow of funds, and the kind of ticket sizes that one can actually access. We looked at the institutions that are actually provided for to supervise the receiving as well as the deployment of these funds, the kind of other avenues and opportunities that there can be for institutions like ours in terms of accessing these finances. And I think one of the requirements was to go through some financial capacity assessment. In terms of application, again, we realized that the skill set required is actually very unique. There's a lot of technical data that is actually needed to be presented, for example, on carbon sequestration. Of course, the arguments around justifying your intervention are also very technical, but we also saw that whatever else is needed is manageable. Then when it came to issues of partnerships, due to the nature of the funding structure, we realized that we actually require very high-level partners, these accredited entities. In our case, institutions like IFAD, Africa Development Bank, and so on. And what you realize is that there are very few of them. And they're actually mainly banks, and they're actually large banks. So one, you need to ensure that you're actually lobbying them or in partnership with them for them to actually partner with you. Then if they agree, you have to then push for them to actually support, because they have to do co-financing. And they have to also vet your proposal. So the chances actually get slimmer as you get to applying for the funds. We also realize that you also need country-level partners. For example, if most of the funding has a lending component, you actually need to work with agriculture-friendly banks, which again is an issue. So these partners have all to agree, and once they all agree, then you start the painful process of actually waiting for the funding. So in our view, I think the current architecture is not easy for any farm organization to navigate. There's need to procure services outside of your institution to be able to develop bankable projects. Most of the accredited entities, like I mentioned, are banks whose lending portfolio is less than 10% to agriculture. Thus, the chances of an agriculture-led proposal by farm organizations is actually very low. The accreditation process is also very long. It has a lot of requirements that you need to work on. And hence, you have to look for what we call agriculture lending institutions or agriculture lending entities to work with. The option of delivery partners is one option that can actually be explored. So in short, I think unless and until some of these requirements are probably reviewed downwards for institutions like ours to be able to access, it's still going to be very tough for us to access climate finance. And unless and until there are other innovative ways to provide finance, we'll still have this challenge of farmers directly accessing climate finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. You pointed out all the complexity of funding, and there are plenty of preparatory times, there are plenty of requirements. You need to ally with accredited organizations. I know that this is a bit unfair for you, Amanda, to be last to reply as a donor representative for these issues, but it would be very interesting to hear, do the donors in general recognize this problem, and what do you see would be the best opportunities to easing up the access to climate funding so that it would reach already these farmers and their organizations?
Thank you very much. And thank you to the rest of the panel for the reflections. It's very important to hear your experiences. So in terms of access to climate finance and the critical issues, I would like to start by saying that I'm from the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, and we are responsible for a significant part of Swedish climate finance. So in 2021, we distributed 4.12 billion Swedish krona to climate finance activities. And just to give a little bit of context, what those numbers include, 45% of that funding was directed towards adaptation activities, while 34% were directed towards cross-cutting activities, so both adaptation and mitigation. And here we also try to work in a holistic way so that we integrate other perspectives in our operations. So just to also set the scene and say that 34% of these 4.12 billion Swedish krona also integrated aspects of biodiversity, which is, I think, relevant to this conversation. And one of the biggest sectors within this distributed finance was towards agriculture. So regarding access, in SIDA's view, it's very positive that accessibility is raised broadly and also by vulnerable communities, such as smallholder farmers. And SIDA is working to support inclusive decision-making processes, so taking in the perspectives of smallholder farmers in the decision-making. This broad-based local and national ownership is key to sustainable development and also sustainable results from climate finance. So we're trying to work together with our partners to make sure that we're relevant in the context that we are in. And in SIDA's operations, just to expand on that, countries and organizations' own needs, priorities and strategies are integrated into, weighted into SIDA strategies. So we ensure that we are doing relevant things. And this constitutes a fundamental entry point for all SIDA's activities, also beyond climate finance. So also to say that inclusive decision-making, local ownership, local solutions, and a human rights-based approach is critical in tackling crises, including the climate crises. So one issue regarding accessibility is, as we've heard, ensuring adequate financial and narrative follow-up of ODA funding. And here we from SIDA see intermediaries as an important actor. They can play an important part to resolve this issue. So they can reach a broad scope locally and also provide capacity building and support with follow-up to our partners. So another issue is to reach global scale while ensuring that the funding reaches local level, which is one of the issues that we've also heard here. So SIDA is committed to facilitate inclusive, locally led adaptation to strengthen resilience, while also reducing the vulnerability of people living in poverty. So just to mention also that SIDA has endorsed the 8 principles for locally led adaptation. And it's important also to mention that in this context of finance, it's important to work with various tools, including mobilization of capital. And here I would also like to mention that SIDA works strategically in this area with several tools beyond ODA grants to catalyze finance for climate action in developing countries. So, for example, through working with private actors in relation to guarantees. Yes, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanda. One of the issues that we often hear is that we hear these very big numbers, big pledges. There is a discussion on locally led adaptation, but most of at least the conventional climate funding is managed by the governments. I would like to ask first the farmer constituency members, like, what is your contact with the government, be it local government or national government, and do you have the feeling that you have a voice in these discussions so that you can raise your problems and dialogue and look for new opportunities for funding? I don't know if we start with Mr. Aquino.
As far as coconut producers are concerned in our country, I think the decision making when it comes to financial decision are solely in the hands of the government. It's very seldom, or I don't remember any occasion wherein farmers' organizations were consulted on how these funds should be allocated or disbursed. And I also do not have that experience of having very easy access to government fundings. No? It's very meticulous, and the requirements are, it's not easy for ordinary farmers to comply with. And if you don't have that conditionalities to acquire this finance, definitely you will not be given any finances. Aside from that, the big issue there is collateral, no? Because, agriculture and farming, especially in our country, and maybe also in Asia and Pacific, is too risky because of the fact that we are on the typhoon belt, no? Especially Philippines, we are experiencing 20 typhoons. Some are super typhoons every year, no? So it's very risky to plant, no? With the limited financial capital of our coconut farmers to plant, to grow food production, and then here comes a typhoon and everybody lost. So where do we get another capital for that? So it's very hard, really. That's why we are also asking if financial institutions such as SIDA and other institutions can also give access for crop insurance, no? So that the risk of producing food will be lessened, no? On the part of the farmers. I think that's one good or major project that can be done, no? So again, as far as we are concerned, the decisions are always from top to bottom, no? So we are just recipient of the decisions. Oh no, it should be the other way around. It should be from bottom to top, because farmers knows what are the problem, no, and what are the possible solution to that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that your final sentence was very important. Farmers know what they're doing. They also know the solutions and what are the conditions for the solutions. But maybe, Mr. Gonzalez, you could then explain how you feel in Paraguay. Have you been able to participate in government dialogue, and do you think that that could be a solution to open access?
Realmente yo creo que si se manejara a nivel estatal, no solamente en Paraguay, sino que en toda Latinoamérica, va a ir condenado desde el principio al fracaso. Estamos viendo que hay muchísima ayuda en todos estos años de cooperaciones internacionales que se han realizado a través de los diferentes gobiernos, pero vemos que eso no tiene sentido, nunca ha llegado al pueblo, nunca ha llegado a los pequeños productores. Son manejados en muchas oportunidades en forma sesgada, en forma política. No ha servido, no ha llegado a los pequeños productores. Duele decirlo como decimos, pero hay que decirlo. Realmente los gobiernos están en otra cosa. La mayoría de los gobiernos en Latinoamérica no están interesados en el bienestar de los pequeños productores. En la mayoría de las naciones de Latinoamérica, los gobiernos están ausentes y nosotros podemos decir de que realmente ante la ausencia de ese gobierno, gracias al comercio justo, reparamos caminos, ayudamos a que muera menos gente durante la pandemia. Estamos peleando para que realmente podamos seguir produciendo, a pesar de que, como un ejemplo, en Paraguay tuvimos 3 meses de una sequía terrible, con temperaturas que oscilaban de 42 a 50 grados de día y 34 grados a las 3 de la mañana. Entonces, el gobierno no tuvo ninguna respuesta. El gobierno nunca ha enviado ninguna respuesta. Y yo creo que así también en todos los países, ya sea en México, en Guatemala, en Colombia, en Argentina o en Brasil, en todas partes. Y quizá en todo el mundo del sur, los gobiernos nunca han dado respuesta a los pequeños productores. Nosotros seguimos luchando, seguimos produciendo gracias al apoyo del comercio justo, porque vemos que a través del comercio justo hemos logrado desarrollar una fuerza propia, hemos logrado realmente ser dueños de nuestro propio destino, hemos logrado construir sin depender de un Mesías, sin depender de una persona que tiene otros intereses para salir adelante. Y eso es lo que nos hace fuerte a los pequeños productores, no estar dependiendo del humor del gobernante de turno. Y por eso nos gustaría de que si realmente hay un financiamiento climático, si hay una ayuda financiera para el cambio climático, que sea a través de los gremios, no a través de los gobiernos, porque sabemos que nunca va a llegar al pequeño productor.
This was quite a somber view for the government and the possibilities to provide climate funding. What is your position, Steve? Have you, as a farm organization, been able to dialogue with the governments and look for funding opportunities with them?
Yes, thank you. I think the picture is almost similar to East Africa. I think in my region, governments are usually a bit more receptive in terms of engaging with civil society and farmer associations. They also have challenges of capacity, by the way, so they also benefit a lot from what we know. However, what you find is that, for example, in the current arrangements, a lot of the national programs, climate programs, you won't find farmer associations in those committees. So the finances will be received by governments. Governments will make decisions as to the projects that they're actually going to support. And there'll be little oversight by farmer associations. And I think that's why any small shocks at the farmer level wipes out any gains that may have actually been achieved. I think so far our involvement with governments can actually be better. I think it can actually improve. We are trying to lobby. In fact, one of the things as a federation we hope to achieve is, after this COP, is to actually see how better we can partner with governments, how better we can have our associations in those committees, how better we can hold governments to account. I come from Kenya, and I think our president signed quite a number of agreements early this week, with respect to climate financing. But you'll find a lot of them are huge infrastructural projects that may not directly benefit the farmers. So I think we still, just like I said earlier, this whole area of climate finance and how farmers can actually either benefit or get involved is still quite gray for a farmer association. And I think a lot of institutions take advantage of the fact that probably we don't know, we don't have information, and it's not first-hand to actually receive the money on our behalf and spend the money on our behalf. So when you look at prioritization of projects, it may not be really what may be a priority for farmer associations. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. I think whoever who is supporting our governments should make a provision in the contractual agreements or documents to provide for, involvement and engagement of institutions like ours, so that then we can also have an oversight role and a say as to the impacts of these programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Last COP and this COP has really taken food and agriculture seriously, and we start to see the engagement of farmers. Coronivia working group has been advancing, but there seems to be the feeling by the farmers' organizations that this emphasis on governments and their responsibilities doesn't really include them and deliver climate funding all the way to the farmers. We have the IFAD study from 2020, which says that 1.7% of all climate funding reaches smallholders. So what is your feeling, Amanda? Are you going to, as a donors, will you study the capacity of different climate financing instruments to reach out to the farmers? And how do you see the situation? What would be the best ways for us as a farmer constituency to prepare us, as to improve the access?
Thank you. So what I can start by saying is that, as I mentioned, SIDA works with various tools, but also various actors. So, for example, we believe that a people perspective is crucial to finding sustainable, rights-based solutions. And here, civil society is important in order to be able to reach to the local level. So the voices and participation from civil society and farmers needs to be included, as there are important actors for adaptation and food system transformation. And here we try to work with different partners, but also be flexible in our way of cooperating. And also, as I mentioned before, we work a lot with capacity building, so together with our partners to be able to to build capacity for long-term support over time and ensure that the results are sustainable. So this is something that we try to, how we try to approach it in this way.
Thank you. I would take one question now from the audience, because then we have a second panel. But if you have an urgent question, and then you could also indicate if you're asking one particular person or you want, all the panelists to answer. Anybody interested in raising a question? Okay, there's one.
Hi, Stephen Lang. I just have a question around conditionality, and it'd be interesting to get your views on the contrast between the conditionality that currently applies to get subsidy payments and, for instance, the conditionality that applied for payments that fueled the Green Revolution, and how that is comparing to the conditionality that is now being applied to get hold of adaptation money for smallholders. Do we have a situation of double standards here that is blocking the system?
Thank you. So the question of conditionalities and, access to funding. Anybody? Steve, I see your head ticking. You want to start?
I don't know whether I got the question right. Talking about conditionalities for access to subsidies versus adaptation funds. First of all, in Africa, I don't even think we have subsidies. Because they are so small. They have no impact. It's a political tool, and I think we need to learn a little bit more of subsidies in Europe and the US, and just to learn how that actually happens. I think for us in Africa, what we need is to really start from basics. I think one of the things we've been pushing as a federation is the whole area of cushioning farmers from shocks. And we've presented these possibilities. For example, tax reliefs. That has actually direct impact on the farmers. And if not that, then it'd be like a package of different subsidies. There are some who require subsidies on inputs, some on markets. For example, right now we are losing livestock because of drought. If there were price guarantees and there was money to actually buy that livestock off the farmer, that would actually help. Farmers are in debt. If there was a way to just cancel those debts, for the farmers. Issues of infrastructure. Now there's no water. Are we able to drill, distribute, store, provide money for, drip irrigation, for example, so that farmers can actually access that? I think for me, that's what I actually see. And the most important thing is, how can farm organizations be involved in decision-making in committees that are deciding what subsidy, in terms of priorities, the deployment, the oversight, and also to give feedback. However, what we see is that I think going forward, we don't foresee a situation where we will reverse the effects of climate change. So it means you still need more subsidy, you need more money, because these effects, I don't see them getting reversed. So the challenges are going to be actually bigger than they are right now. So with the issue of adaptation funds, we've been calling for affirmative action. We need to have farmers accessing funds directly. Yeah. So we need to figure out what's the challenge of them not accessing the funds directly. Is it a capacity issue? Is it a governance issue? Okay. Then we deal with that. If it's a governance issue, we deal with the governance issues for farmers. If it's a capacity issue, I'm sure there's a way to provide that capacity for them to actually access. But most importantly, I mean, we are a regional farm organization representing 24 apex organizations. For whatever reason, government doesn't want to work with us. A lot of these institutions don't want to work with us. They want to work with other entities. Yeah? And these other entities don't represent us. But they say they speak on our behalf. So I think there has to be affirmative action. Whatever entity that actually wants to work with us, there has to be authorization from us. We have to say, no, we want to work with them because they're providing this intervention or this kind of capacity. So unless that is cleared, then there will be governance-related issues with respect to subsidy and with respect to adaptation funds. Thank you.
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest conditionality in applying financial access for the part of the farmers is the issue of collateral or ownership of the land. Now, in third world countries such as the Philippines, many farmers are landless. They do not own the land. So they cannot access these finances because there's nothing for them to collateralize, no? Because they don't have properties. All they have are their labor force and their determination to produce food. So it goes now to the better option of subsidy. And I believe financial institutions should subsidize, no, those organizations that has track record, no, just like Fairtrade International, for them to give support, no, because their track record speak for themselves that they're really doing this for the fight against this global warming. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know, Mr. Gonzalez, do you have any view on this, or Amanda? Please, Andrés.
Sí, realmente entendemos que el financiamiento tiene mucha burocracia con relación a lo que son las limitaciones de un pequeño productor. Esa burocracia hace imposible que un pequeño productor del sur pueda acceder a un financiamiento. Entonces, la situación se complica. Pero en cuanto a la pregunta, según lo que entendí, también habla de... Realmente el problema principal desde el punto de vista comercial, yo veo que no hay un comercio con justicia. O sea que una forma de decir es que el sistema convencional de comercio que estamos en la mayor parte del mundo está utilizando, la mayoría de los países del norte están subvencionando la producción agrícola. La mayoría de los productores están siendo subvencionados en el norte, pero en el sur no recibimos ningún subsidio, ninguna subvención. Entonces no hay un comercio con justicia. Entonces nosotros estamos peleando con el comercio justo porque creemos que es la mejor alternativa para salir adelante, para que realmente el pequeño productor pueda ser empoderado, para que el pequeño productor pueda recibir la mayor parte de los beneficios, no como el sistema convencional en la cual los intermediarios reciben todo el dinero y los productores reciben todas las pérdidas, todo el riesgo, y los consumidores reciben los productos mucho más caros. Partiendo de eso, entendemos que sin comercio justo no puede haber justicia climática, ni tampoco podemos hablar de que haya una justicia climática sin respetar los derechos humanos básicos, fundamentales.
Thank you. Amanda, do you want to say something to finish the panel discussion?
Maybe I can just say that I really appreciate this opportunity to hear from three different perspectives, three different continents, where SIDA is active And it's very valuable for us to get these experiences from you that I can bring back with me to our colleagues to feed into our operations, so we can also learn from you and continue to work in a human rights-based approach focusing on local needs.
Good, thank you. I think this was a good conclusion for the panel. Let's give them a hand. And now we have a second panel who will look more into market-driven finance. While we thank the panelists, you can leave the headsets to the table. I would like to ask the panelists of the next panel. And I have here first the Fairtrade speaker, Mr. Benjamin Kuome from Ivory Coast, who is a cocoa producer. S'il vous plaît. We have Mr. Moussa Sow, who is from Roppa, and Mr. Alec Jones from UK, and we have Mr. Jahan Choudhury from IFAD. I know that now I'm the lady of the panel, so please excuse us.
The panel is so gender imbalanced.
Yes, I'm trying to balance here for you. So we were hoping that you would explore a bit more market-driven possibilities. I know that Fairtrade is already one of these instruments, but like if the governments are not working too well to provide funding for farmers, forest farm organizations, farm organizations, I would like to ask you then to explore a bit. What is your perspective? How do you see what could be the way to go? And if you have any good experiences or even bad experiences you would like to share with us.
I have a short presentation. Did you say it?
I don't have internet.
No, it's on a stick.
I
Yeah, it's there.
don't have it.
Well, I'm going to be speaking on carbon market.
Okay. I'll ask for the presentation to be brought. There. Okay. It's coming. Okay. Maybe Moussa Sow is speaking on behalf of ROPA, which is a West African farmers organization. Maybe you can already present yourself more in detail while we are waiting the presentation to start the soonest.
Thank you very much. My full name is Moussa F. Sow. I am the second vice president of ROPA. ROPA is a network of producers and processors in West Africa. I'm also the president of the coordinating body of farmers, livestock, foresters, fisheries, and food processors in the Gambia. But I speak here in the name of PAFO to speak on the carbon market in the name of PAFO. Thank you.
Do we have the presentation there on? You can go there.
Good afternoon, colleagues. This is a very short presentation. I'm going to be presenting on the due diligence and the certificate procedure for better use of compensation for climate efforts. Under the same question also is, does this work for adaptation and mitigation? If you look at the presentation, could due diligence and certification procedure be better used to compensate climate efforts? Would this work for adaptation and mitigation? Point number one, I have mentioned that one, there is need to consider the transaction cost in processing certification. Two is there is also need to look at promote gender equity and also respecting customary tenure rights, and ensuring full and effective participation of all stakeholders, improve on social and political environment, and mass sensitization and information. Basically, when we talk about carbon market, the certification process should also understand there are norms and values that are already, within our cultures that must be recognized. Under the same point, does this work for adaptation and mitigation? Yes, because we believe that carbon marketing plays a critical role in limiting global warming, plays a major role in financing nature-based solutions, and also manage climate risk, promote renewable energy and economic benefits. We believe that when carbon marketing is really given the right platform, these are the hopes that I believe could also support, particularly when it has to do with generating income and so. And on that, then we will have to go into the next point, bullet point. How do you see the participation of smallholders in this scheme? The scheme here means carbon marketing. Basically, it promotes sustainable land management, because if farmers are involved in carbon marketing, I believe that first of all, what it also would contribute to is sustainable land management. It also provides entry to carbon market for smallholders, particularly for agroforesters. We believe that when the carbon market really takes place, particularly for agroforestry farmers, will also be benefiting from the carbon market. So it also generates additional revenue. What we're saying that it's obviously there are opportunities that the farmers who are involved in the carbon market would also have to have some benefits, in form of increased income and also creative employment. Technology transfer is very, very possible because the carbon market is quite very new in Africa. It also requires some technology transfer in terms of how do we sustain the carbon market itself. The other one was farmers in carbon market sequence. Obviously, there are some payments that are obvious to be, will serve as benefits for the farmers that are involved in carbon marketing. Again, it also facilitates physical delivery of carbon credits. We all know that farmers who are involved in these schemes would obviously have an opportunity to have some credits, even though credits is not the best way for adaptations, because we are saying that if you go by the Paris Agreement, credits is a red line, unless if it has to address mitigation, then it's okay based on the Paris Agreement. And under the same point, we also have how can their integration in this process be enhanced? First of all, the first point I had is it is not really have to attract some cost. It has to be based on improved yield, access to finance, and credit. Because when it attracts costs, it's really not going to encourage many of the farmers to really join. Invest in local infrastructure. We believe that in order to integrate and enhance the process for farmers, you need to also invest the adaptation fund in building infrastructure. And the development and the promotion of income-generating activities. In adaptation, basically, it's not only going to be looking at production. Along the value chain, processing, entrepreneurship, post-harvest management, and all this needs to be looked at. So along the value chain. So low-cost conservation measures like zero-tillage farming, cover cropping, agroforestry, rotational farming, and grazing. Because this is another system that is used to enhance the carbon market. We also need to see, in order to enhance the capacity of the farmers, they also need to see how we look at some environmentally friendly activity, which includes crop rotation, cover cropping, agroforestry. In designing and implementing participating monitoring, report, and evaluation. One way also in order to integrate the process and to enhance their capacity, there is need to look at how farmers also participate in monitoring, reporting, evaluation, and so. And also, one other final point is increasing awareness of nature-based solutions are also very, very critical when you want to integrate the carbon market with farmers. On the same assignment, under the same broad points, how to manage risk when you're doing carbon marketing. First bullet point I've mentioned is diversified agricultural production, meaning that you don't only have to depend on one production cycle, but there is need to look at other means of also getting income. For the fact that when you talk about diversifying, you don't only have to have crops, but you also need to have crops, livestock, and some other entrepreneurship, value addition. These are all means of helping to manage risk. And the other aspect is planting forests and restoring damaged ecosystem, which is also part of mitigation. At one point, also support adaptation. Mobilize more resources and access finance. All what we do in the adaptation or carbon market is there's possibility of mobilizing resources, but also to sustain the program, there is need to see how we have more resources at the level of the communities. Government policies, capacity building for institutional and individuals. We know that governments, the political will is very, very important. All what we do is it has to really be speaking to the policies that are developed. So government role in having to develop the right policies also is very, very critical in order to reduce risk. Policies that speaks on the environment, policies that promote adaptation and also resilience building is very, very central and key. Better information to access information. Better information and also to access information. Meaning that there is need to see how information are accessible to farmers when they have to grow, when they have to produce, when they have to harvest, and also some forecasting based on the seasonal calendar is also very, very key in this. Invest on production and productivity. Government, not only donors, but there is also need for local funds mobilization by our public funding, for example, at the level of governments. National budgets should also be increased to see how they can also reduce risk. On the same point, mainstream gender and youth.
Musa, I hope that you speed up to leave some floor to the others.
I'm going to be summarizing now. There's also need to look at gender and women if you have to reduce risk. And also technology transfer, value addition and training, open dialogue between science and traditional knowledge, participation research actions. And finally, do you have examples that you would like to share on market-based mechanisms? There are two schemes which is very, very new in Africa. I would not be in a position to really share those, give more in-depth knowledge on the schemes. But I know that there are two available schemes for carbon market. One is the emission trading scheme and also crediting mechanism. Thank you very much. I'm sorry that I couldn't have gone through all the presentation based on the time limit. Thank you.
Thank you, Musa. That was very thorough. Let's maybe go to another country in West Africa, to the Ivory Coast. Mr. Benjamin Kuome, would you kindly share your views on possibilities of using market-driven mechanisms to promote smallholders and get access to climate funding?
Merci, je suis Kuome Benjamin Franklin, je suis producteur de cacao, basé en Côte d'Ivoire. Je suis le président du conseil d'administration de Fairtrade Africa. C'est un honneur pour moi parce que représentant des milliers de producteurs, de me retrouver à cette tribune, de parler des questions de marché. Et je suis heureux également, comme je l'ai dit, de me retrouver ici. Alors, quand on parle de marché, pour moi, on parle forcément de produits. De produits, mais surtout de produits compétitifs. Et l'expérience que nous avons, c'est que pour nous, avant d'aller vers le marché, il faut pouvoir d'abord avoir des bonnes pratiques agricoles. Et en plus, il faut aussi utiliser toutes les ressources qui vous permettent de produire, de donner sur le marché un produit compétitif et un produit de qualité. Il faut, selon notre entendement, faire de la planification pour mener des activités de sorte que quand vous arrivez sur le terrain, sur le marché, sur le terrain du marché, vous soyez compétitif. Non, je n'entends pas. Je reviens. La question que vous allez poser, est-ce que vous...
When you speak about the competitive products, what do you think could provide others? Okay. Si on parle de compétitivité des produits, quels sont les aspects que vous pourriez inclure pour donner un premium pour la production qui est climatiquement intelligente? Est-ce que vous avez des expériences? Est-ce que vous avez des idées?
Bien sûr. Bien sûr que d'abord nous avons des expériences parce que le système classique de production que nous connaissons, nous avons basculé maintenant dans un système plus organique qui respecte les normes environnementales. Tout en respectant les normes environnementales, nous sommes convaincus aussi de la qualité de ces produits. Je vous prends un exemple. Aujourd'hui, la tendance que nous sommes en train de faire, c'est une fertilisation des sols avec de la matière organique. Ce que nous continuons de faire, c'est de faire en sorte que nous assurons l'équilibre entre le système écologique et faire notre activité de sorte à garder les normes, mais aussi produire selon les normes que nous voulons.
Très bien, merci. Donc, je vais passer la parole au producteur suivant. So then we have Mr. Ala Jones from the UK. Very different context, very different country, but as a farmer, you also deal with the nature. How do you see the opportunities that market could offer for more climate intelligent farming, and where do you see the problems and risks? Please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a pleasure being here with you this afternoon. I'm Ala Jones and I'm a farmer, farming dairy cows and sheep. It's great to be here. This is my first conference, climate change conference, and pleased as well that the voice of farming is being heard. It was a message yesterday that the appreciation that farmers are part of the problem, but a huge part of the solution, and that's a really positive message. Now, back home, the discussion on farming policies for the future has been ongoing, and the direction of travel is for support being made for environmental support. And this is, of course, due to the pressures of environmental change. And this is right, no problem. Likewise, biodiversity and water quality and air quality is part of the policies that they are promoting back in the UK. We've probably seen some small interventions over the past years, but not at scale at the moment. And our government is developing these small interventions with public support, but these need scaling up. Now, for the last 2 years, we've been exploring the scope for environmental markets as a potential source of income for members. And so we've been canvassing all our membership to make sure that we have a good understanding of what it actually means for a farmer. Now, these workshops ran in small groups. We're looking closely at economic models, and farmers shared their experiences of entering these environmental markets, and we're finding baseline projects, development costs, and among the topics of conversation. And I almost feel destined to be here this afternoon, because when I travelled here on Tuesday, on one side I had a climate scientist, and on the other side of me sat a financier, and there was I, the farmer, in the middle. So I was the filling in the sandwich, if you like, and if anything, this is the analogy which I probably like to develop with you this afternoon. Because certainly, when you consider the potential that farming throughout the world offers to mitigate climate change, then it is enormous. Now, as part of these workshops, we concluded that there were 5 key principles that were required really for a successful environmental market and the approach that we were looking for, and particularly for the agriculture sector. Now, number one principle, and I'm sure nobody would disagree, the environmental markets must work alongside, hand in hand, hand in glove with domestic food production, fibre and energy. Now, I don't think there'll be any disagreement on this subject. We know full well how tense the world food supply is, and particularly, as we've noticed probably during this COP conference, that we'll be hitting an 8 billion global population. So that's fundamental, that all policies have to make sure that they run concurrently with food production and supply of good, healthy, sustainable food. And that's number one principle. Now, number two, public policy and government initiatives must support the development of private markets. Now, I see this as crucial. There's no point in government or policymakers designing policies unless it attracts the ability of private money coming into the industry. I've heard this several times during the past few days, that there's not enough finance within public purses, within government funding, to be able to deal with the climate cost. Now, this is crucial that we are able to attract finance from the private sector to come into farming. This is absolutely crucial. And I have the analogy, if you design a principle, it's almost like if you're designing a lock for a door, and that lock is a very particular lock, but you need the key to unlock the door. And that key will be the private money that will come in. And that's crucial, so we can design these policies in coordination, and the principles will be the same, that the private support that will be able to come into the industry would fit in very closely. Now, the environmental markets require clear rules. This is number 3. Clear rules and standards to allow farmers and buyers to participate with confidence. And this is crucial. We cannot allow discrepancies. We need to be the development of a robust and reputable and internationally recognized as well. I mentioned that quite clearly, because this is a global food system, it's a global problem, and likewise we need internationally recognized high integrity environmental markets which are relevant to agriculture. Now, principle number 4, markets should be accessible across a range of farm sizes, tenures and business structures. And I think we heard these comments made in the previous panel, where small farmers should be able to access these environmental markets. And that's a key consideration. In my own country, our farm scale is particularly small. We need to find a way that small farmers can bind together, can be aggregated. So if they are accessing large pots of money, then at least they can work and cooperate together. So that's absolutely crucial. Nobody should be barred away from entering the environmental markets principles. Principle number 5, farmers must be fairly rewarded for the delivery of environmental goods, and this is crucial. I've heard it said several times, you cannot be in the green unless you are in the black. And this is certainly because unprofitable farms will never invest in environmental protection and gain. So this is crucial for us. We need profitable, progressive farmers which will actually invest in the long-term sustainability of their farms and deliver on climate adaptation. So I'll leave it at that, and most happy to take questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. That was very clear. And now we have next here, on behalf of IFAD, Mr. Jahan Chowdhury. And I think it was very clearly said, farming must be profitable, even if it's going towards more nature-based direction. What is the position of IFAD, and how do you think that we could further support farmers to go to that direction?
Thank you. It's very cold here and I'm super hungry. I bet you are too. So I'm going to keep it very short. I want you to remember one figure, and that is 1/3. 1/3 of the food that is being produced globally is coming from smallholder farmers. 1/3 of the food that is being wasted already globally, including here, and 1/3 of the global emission is actually coming from the food systems. As previous speakers had already mentioned, in terms of the total financing needs in the food systems, we are looking at $300 billion per year. If we want to transition food systems into green processing, green marketing, green distribution, $300 billion is what we need. Now, that may sound like a large amount, but guess what? How much money you have spent on Apple products till today, this year? $436 billion. So when you compare what we are spending, even within this fiscal crisis, versus what is actually needed when it comes to food systems, it's not that much. All right, so that's one point that I wanted to clarify or bring your attention to. The second, how do we connect the dots between the demand and the supply? Obviously, we are seeing a large gap. When you go to the companies who are pledging for net zero, sitting on $130 trillion, they say, we can't find the pipeline. And when you go to the countries, they say, we can't find the money. So obviously, there's a problem between demand and the supply. And I've always said this, when it comes to climate finance, the public sector and the private sector, it is certainly not love at first sight. It's almost like arranged marriage where the love grows after the marriage, because you have to structure it. So how are we from IFAD side structuring that marriage? There are various different instruments that we are deploying. For example, first loss risk facility, because if you can take some of the risk that the private sector is likely to face, then you can attract more financing. Why do I talk about private sector financing? Because that is the reality. We do not have sufficient public sector financing, especially under current fiscal situation. It is actually going down. So that's important, bringing the private sector in. But oftentimes when you think about private sector, we are looking outward. But we should also look inward. There are a lot of national development banks, commercial banks, who do have the liquidity, who would be able to deploy financing for this green transition. So first loss facility for them is very important. The second is guarantee, of course. You can bring the cost of financing down substantially if you have guarantee facility in place. You can also have on-lending. So we are providing on-lending support to various different agricultural banks. By providing that support, you're essentially increasing their capital base. And if you're increasing their capital base, they have much larger portfolio to focus on smallholder farmers. And there are various other complicated instruments that we deploy. I don't want to get into those. What I want to talk about today, within the next couple of minutes, is a concept that we are currently designing. Our first speaker talked about carbon credit. Imagine a world where we could have a resilience credit. If you can quantify GHG emission reduction and you can price it in form of carbon credit, it is actually possible to monetize resilience benefits, convert this into a credit, taking risk and pricing into consideration. And that is exactly what we from IFAD side is trying to do. This is not something that we are trying to do just for IFAD. It is going to be our contribution to the global knowledge pool. And you will see this concept being highlighted as an innovative instrument in the Just Finance guidebook that was launched day before yesterday by the Egyptian presidency. So the concept is there. Very simply, it has got a complicated structure, it has got a commercial part, and there is no doubt about the importance of the commercial part if you want to attract the private sector financing. But it has also a social part. If farmers are actually improving the overall resilience of the communities, then they should be rewarded. Yeah? And that reward is going to come in form of a credit. So what we are thinking about is that the farmers will actually own this new asset class. They will own it, they will manage it, and they will trade it. And by doing that, you are also injecting that empowerment concept when it comes to farmers' overall mindset and also their asset base. We are forming an advisory group in order to further design this concept with the COP27 presidency. And this advisory group will direct the further design of this pilot testing, and we hope to launch it at COP28 in UAE. I can talk more about this concept, but you can also find it out in the Just Finance handbook published. It's online, page 40 if you want to get a summary, page 188 if you want to get the details. Thank you.
Thank you, Jahan. I would like to give the hand to the panelists because we are running out of time. And we have Esther Penunia saying a couple of words to close this. I know that the translators are probably about to leave. Can we take 2 minutes more, please? Yes, thank you. So let's give a hand for the panelists. And I would like to ask Esther from the Asian Farmers Association for Sustainable Rural Development to say a couple of words to close this. Please, Esther.
Okay, thank you very much, Tina, and thank you very much for the panelists of both panel session 1 and panel session 2. Our panel is entitled Money Where It Matters. So we take first where it matters. Okay? So in the both panels, my takeaway is that money matters with farmers and producers, especially with smallholder family farmers, because through the solutions that family farmers provide, fair trade practices, climate resilient, integrated, diversified, organic, sustainable, regenerative, and agroecological approaches in farms and forests, we are able, I take it also personally because we are a farmers organization, so I hope it's okay. So we can provide food and nutrition, soil health, increased incomes, and empowerment of farmers promoting our rights to food. It also matters to support farmers because, as what our speakers have said, their livelihoods are now threatened with climate change. Farmers are the most vulnerable to climate change because our livelihoods and incomes rely very much on favorable weather, climate, soil health, and rights to lands, as what our panelist from Paraguay has said. Okay. Now we go to the money part. The money part. We said there is money. I heard there is money. But there are challenges to getting this money. First, we don't know where the pipeline is. Second, the requirements are very tedious. And lastly, we are not involved in designing or in implementing or in even policy making with regards to climate financing. In fact, only 1.7 of climate financing goes directly to small-scale farmers. We heard about innovations in climate financing, mainly market-driven innovations like carbon credits, environmental markets, guarantees on lending, and the last one is with IFAD, resiliency credit. I would like to tell personally, maybe as a Farmers Forum member of the steering committee, please involve us in the design of this resiliency credit, because we have asked in IFAD Farmers Forum processes to really be part of this design. So, lastly, with three things. First, please show us the money. Show us the money. You said 300 billion we need for climate financing. Second, we will show you where to use the money, okay? Because we have the solutions. And third, please, if you use the money, use it with us through our farmers' organizations and cooperatives directly financing our efforts to build climate resiliency with emission-reducing benefit. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you all. Let's keep fighting for the money.